So first thing we need to do before we intubate the patient is we need to prepare them. So first thing is ramping. We got to provide a pillow or blankets, anything to get the patients into sniffing position and provide the ear to sternal notch position, or we want to align the oropharyngeal and laryngeal axes. Second thing we want to do is provide pre-oxygenation. So this involves a nasal cannula at 15 liters per minute in conjunction with an NRB or BVM at 15 liters per minute for 2 to 3 minutes. Second thing we need to do is provide a Lemon score, and this will predict a difficult airway in an awake, conscious patient, ideally sitting up. So first thing is L. We want to evaluate, we want to look externally. We want to see if the patient has a short, thick neck, if they have any obesity, any external anatomical conditions externally that'll predict a difficult airway. Second, we want to evaluate the 3-3-2 rule, so 3 of the patient's own fingers in their mouth, 3 from the mandible down to the hyoid bone, and 2 from the hyoid bone down to the thyroid notch. Third, the Malampati score. 1 will be a relatively easy intubation. You'll be able to see good visualization of the airway. The tongue won't be obstructing much view. A 4, on the other hand, will be a difficult intubation, as the tongue will be obstructing most of the view, and you really only be able to see the hard palate. O will be any obstructions, so that could be a foreign body, teeth, masses, pus, blood, emesis, anything that will need to suction out of the airway. And N will be neck mobility, so any other anatomical conditions such as curves of the spine, if the patient is C-collared, or if there's any trauma, that'll predict a difficult airway. After we've done the Lemon score, pre-oxygenation, we want to prep our equipment. So, starting with suction, we want to power the suction up 300 millimeters of mercury. And we want to make sure that's tucked underneath the pillow of the patient's head. Ideally, with an adult, we want to suction between 80 and 120 millimeters of mercury. We want to make sure we have our HEPA filter, which is also on the BVM. We want to make sure we have our laryngoscope and our blade. So with this patient, we're going to use a 7, and we're going to use a size smaller, so a 6.5, and a size bigger, just in case. But on this patient, we're going to be using a 7. We want to make sure we have our OPA, which is already in place, our stylet, which is going to be preloaded onto the ETT tube, which is going to be set onto the patient's chest. We want to make sure we have our syringe, which is also attached to the ETT. Next, we want to make sure we have our bougie ready, just in case it's a difficult airway. We want to make sure we have our backup airway, which will be our King LT. We want to make sure we inflate the bulb, make sure there's no leaks, and have the syringe attached. We have our EDD inflation device. We have our Thomas tube holder already preset underneath the patient's head. We have our lubricating spray, which we can spray on the bottom of our ETT. We have our McGill forceps in case we have a foreign body. And we have our NPAs already in the patient's nose, providing pre-oxygenation. We have our Crite kit open and laid out and prepared on the patient's chest. So now we'll go through our checklist and make sure we have everything ready before we intubate. So I'll read this off to my partners here. Patient has been assessed for the level of difficulty. We've done the Lemon assessment.
Yes.
Patient is prepared. We have our NRB, BVM ventilations. In this case, we're going to be doing a BVM ventilation.
Yep.
2-person. Nasal cannula at 15 liters per minute.
Yep.
Oxygen is flowing.
Yes.
Patient has been ramped into sniffing position.
Yes.
We have our equipment paired. We have our PPE, gloves, masks.
Yep.
Monitor is on with our Untitled connected.
Yes.
Vital signs, our BP is attached, SpO2 is attached.
Yes.
Yes.
Suction has been tested.
Yep.
Yep.
McGill's near the patient's head.
Yep.
Laryngoscope has the appropriate blade. In this case, we're going to be using a 3 attached to the blade. And we're going to also make sure that the light is on and working. ETT, as previously stated, we have our ETT.
Yep.
EDD, rescue airways, Crite kit, basic airways, HEPA filter, open and prepared.
Yep.
Untitled initialized and working.
Yes.
Yes.
And ETT holder under the patient's neck.
Yes.
So at this point, we've been pre-oxygenation pre-oxygenating the patient for 2 to 3 minutes. I think we're ready to intubate. So I'll delegate my partners their tasks. So Rob, you're gonna provide ELM when I ask.
Okay.
And Jill, you're gonna count down
Okay.
30. You're also gonna let me know if the SpO2 drops before 85.
Sounds good.
If it does drop below 85, we'll go back to pre-oxygenating. And then also, would you be able to listen to breath sounds?
Of course.
Okay. So, get my blade ready. We'll provide a few more breaths, and then we'll be ready to intubate. And get my mask on. Okay, so if you guys are ready, then I'm ready.
Okay.
Yep, we'll give
Ready.
one last breath here. Okay, and let's pull up the OPA.
1, 2, 98, 3, 4, 5,
Okay, I got
6,
Hal, now
98,
you go,
7, 8, 9, 10,
I can see the
11,
tube going through the
98,
cords.
12,
22 at the
13,
teeth.
14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
So I can bag Rob. Okay. Do we have any breath sounds over the epigastric?
Absent epigastric. Breath sounds present left APC. Present right APC.
So Rob, we keep banging.
Left base. And
Good.
right base.
And then Joe, would you be able to put the Thomas tube holder on? So after we've intubated, we want to go through our 6 confirmations. So I visualized the tube going through the vocal cords. Saw misting in the tube. I saw end-tidal waveform on the monitor. We had EDD inflation once we placed it on the ETT. And we heard no breath sounds over the epigastrium, and we had breath sounds bilaterally left to right. Now, if we had any problems bagging, we'd go through our dope mnemonic. So starting with D, any displacement of the tube. So we want to make sure the tube is at 22 centimeters. If we've moved the patient into the ambulance or out of the ambulance, the tube may have been displaced, so we can simply fix that by deflating the bulb and retracting the tube back to 22 centimeters. There might be any obstructions for O, so that could be blood, pus, emesis coming through the tubes, which we can fix with deep tracheal section through the tube. P would be pneumothorax, so we may have popped a lung. We can fix that by doing needle decompression. And E, any equipment failure. The end tidal may have been pulled out of the monitor, the SpO2 may be off the patient's finger. We can fix that by putting all the equipment back into place. And if none of those things are fixed, then we'll have to extubate the patient.
Oh!
Yay!
Oh yeah, but